Are you in touch with Zach?
Yeah, I mean, he tweeted last year.
No, but I'm saying, are you in touch with him?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's doing.
All right, we're live.
Oh, good morning, class. We're live. Wow, that was quick. Welcome to the fall 2016 Introduction to Media Review Session. I'm Steve Miller, I'm your host, and I'll be talking to you today about the First Amendment and government regulations, public broadcasting, cable, free speech for sale, and all the other wonderful things we've done this part of the semester. I just want to tell you that here, the wonderful people at RUTV and all the students here are going to be in touch with you when you get in touch. So there's various ways that you can get in touch with them. They have a hashtag, which is Wake Up Rutgers.
Miller ARS F16.
Well, all right, they'll post it on top there. Miller whatever, Academic Review Session 16. F16? Okay. Miller ARS F16. You can hashtag, tweet in, be twits, because we all know that everybody who tweets is a twit on Twitter. You can also go to the Facebook page, right, which is RUTV. Okay, RUTV Facebook. Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. If you have your questions, tweet them in. Do all this stuff. You can like us on Facebook. You can like me on the SIRS, or you don't, whatever. We're trying to do that. But we have a wonderful group of people who are helping us today, led by the inimitable Chelsea Crane, who is going to be out there and do that, and I'm going to give a bad literary reference, and her brother Ichabod. But anyway, so here we're going to do the review session today. And again, please, this is your review session. Take part in it. Let me know what your questions are. We're here to help you try and do well on the final exam. Now, once again, a reminder, the final exam is 100 questions, true, false, multiple choice, and it will be held a week from tomorrow on December 23rd, Friday at 8 a.m. in Academic Building Room 2160. And I hope that you're going to look at this session and get something out of it. And please let us know if you are getting anything out of it. So anyway, as you can see behind me right this way, I have done my left by my right because I'm trying to do this. We're talking first thing about the First Amendment and government regulations. Now, as I said in class during this lecture, the First Amendment is what separates us from all the other countries in the world. And one of the big controversies that's happening right now, not only involving the discussions with President-elect Trump, is something, for example, that's happened in New Jersey recently with Governor Christie, which I didn't mention in class. It's not going to be an exam, but I just want to put it out there. And that is that Governor Christie has proposed a bill which would eliminate the required printing of legal notices in newspapers and just say towns could only do them in websites. And there's a big protest going on about that, saying that it violates the First Amendment because he would be limiting the printing of these legal notices to one government-controlled entity, as opposed to being put out there for all the world to see. So that's one thing. But the First Amendment enables me to speak to you and teach my class the way I want to. As we said in class, there are the four parts of the First Amendment: freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly. And all those things, as you know, have happened this semester here at Rutgers. But what we're going to concentrate on in this review, of course, just as we did in the lecture itself, is freedom of the press and freedom of speech. Now, the First Amendment allegedly prohibits federal regulation of speech and press, yet the Communications Act of 1934 and Telecommunications Act of 1996 have imposed federal regulations. As I said in class, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, I believe it was, said, we have freedom of speech, but you can't yell out fire in a crowded movie theater. There are libel laws. One of the discussion, libel laws and libel, slander, and so forth. And in fact, one of the things that President-elect Trump has said is that he wants to loosen up the libel laws. Well, there are a lot of people who want to make them stricter because you want to have truth in the press. You don't want blatant lies. And the whole discussion of fake news gets involved in that. But the First Amendment is not an absolute. what you use the First Amendment for is to have the ability to print these things, but once you step over a line, there are laws and regulations that deal with that. In fact, not only are federal regulations allowed and enabled under the First Amendment, there are also even tighter rulings that have happened, more important rulings that have happened over time that separate publishers of newspapers and broadcasters, as it says on this screen right over here. Publishers of newspapers own the press and paper, and as such are subject to different regulations than broadcasters. Broadcasters, this is more specifically to over-the-air, terrestrial, old-school broadcasting, are part of what is known as a public trust. And this public trust is that our regulators, our congressional representatives, the people who we elect and those that they appoint, are going to serve our better interests. As such, the restrictions that are put on there are done with the knowledge that they can be regulated by the government, and that the government does have a role in all this. There were 2 court cases back in the day. Again, I've said this a number of times in class, and the people who've taken the 102 course before have heard me say this, that these court decisions are of the time that they're in. They're not, doesn't mean that because the Red Line decision, which came down in 1969 and ruled that, said that the FCC's rule that entitled persons attacked on a broadcast medium, and that should not be media, it should be broadcast medium, to reply to their attackers was legal and just. That doesn't mean that that's still in effect today. And as you know, and we're going to get to this under the Fairness Doctrine, that that's not the case. But again, the decision was made on over-the-air broadcasting on radio and TV that the rule that stated that persons attacked on a broadcast media or in broadcast media had the right to reply. That was different from the Tornillo decision, which said the exact opposite with newspapers, saying that in newspapers, the people who own the newspapers, whatever corporation that own the press, own the paper, and for all intents and purposes, we, the people who were reading these newspapers, are leasing the information in a way by paying for the right to read their property. And it said that people attacked in a newspaper do not have to get and are not legally entitled to have the right to reply. So again, the easy way to remember this: Red Lion, broadcasting, yes to reply. Tornillo, newspaper, no. And the other way that makes it easy is newspaper, no, NN. So a nice little alliteration to try and get your morning going, and I know, it's early for you. But again, Tornillo versus Red Lion. As I said, this is part of a whole group of things that fall under the category or the title of regulated fairness. Now, the Fairness Doctrine, which was in effect officially from 1949 to 1987, can you please change this? Thank you. Mandated that broadcast networks devote time to contrasting views on issues of public importance. That is an extremely important phrase, issues of public importance, and it's meant to level the playing field. Now, one of the articles you have that you're responsible for deals with a Supreme Court decision called Citizens United. Citizens United, which was set down in 2010, said that corporations were people too, that corporations have the same rights as people in terms of how much money and what money they can invest in political races. That would not have happened if the Fairness Doctrine was in effect. And in fact, the most famous, I'll say, part of the Fairness Doctrine was something called the Equal Time Provision, which said that if Olivia Cruiser is running against Chelsea Crane for government office, and I at WSAM, my television station, allow Olivia Cruiser to buy 10 minutes of advertising time, I have to offer that same 10 minutes of time to Chelsea Crane's campaign. And that was equal time. Another thing is go back, thanks. The personal attack rule. The personal attack rule, as we said, is stations have a duty to inform individuals of groups of personal attacks. But there's also the political editorial rule, which said that if I endorse Olivia over Chelsea, I have to give equal time for Chelsea's campaign to respond to that endorsement. Now, you say to yourself, well, as it says behind him right over here, that it was repealed in 2000 and all language about fairness was removed in 2011. However, there is a move to reinstate all of this, especially in the aftermath of what people have been seeing with Citizens United. A great example of this is that this past campaign, over $2.5 billion was spent just on the presidential race alone. One campaign spent more than half of that, the Hillary Clinton campaign. So, and where was the money coming from? So there are people who want to get that back in there. They want to put regulated fairness back into vogue and put back the fairness doctrine. However, there are people who argue against that, saying that they can't give up the time, the valuable television time, every time that they attack or respond to one point of view or another. But there are ways of doing that, and that's one of the things they're working for. Okay, change. But of course, just as with every law that we've discussed this semester, the laws are written vaguely and there are exceptions to the rules. So, for example, what was an idea of public importance isn't determined by the person who thinks it. Just because you're a member of PETA and you want to protect animals doesn't mean that that's considered an idea of public importance. It's determined by the station. And that's an extremely important thing. It's not determined by law. It's not determined by the government. It's not determined by the courts. It's not determined by the FCC. It's determined by the station itself. So in a way, the game itself is fixed because this is enabling the station itself to determine what is in the public domain and what the agenda is. Another thing is fairness with a station, when somebody wanted to protest against a station, dealt with the overall programming of the station, not just because of one incident here or there. The only station I know of that ever had its license revoked was WWOR Channel 9 in New York, and now had to deal more with malfeasance and dealing poorly with their funding, as opposed to any idea of public importance. The third one, and this is a real good one, is that equal time never really meant equal time in the absolute. So if there was a rule that said that if a sitting politician, a sitting government official had to deal with a legitimate news story, there was no obligation on the part of the station to interview their opponent. So, for example, in California in 1990, where they had a lot of wildfires, one of the candidates was a sitting for governor was a sitting one of the candidates for governor was a sitting senator. He got all the airtime. His opponent was not in office, got no airtime. They say it won the race for him. So, you're dealing with the exceptions to the rules and dealing with a lot of stuff here. Now, when you're dealing with the First Amendment, you're not only dealing with the First Amendment itself, you might be dealing with the entire Constitution itself or our entire list of constitutional rights. So one of the big things that we've dealt with, especially in this age of the internet age, especially in the age of gotcha journalism, is the public's right to know versus personal privacy. What do we have the right to know? What do we need to know? What should we know? Versus what is an intrusion on somebody's life outside of the public realm? So, for example, what determines, there are tons of questions that are involved here that you won't be asked about on a test. But if you're going to go forward as a journalism and media studies major, or really just as a citizen, there are certain parameters under which you have to look at these things. So what happens when one alleged constitutional right conflicts with another alleged constitutional right? The most famous case of all, and anybody who's a journalism and media studies major hears about this case at least 5 times this semester in one class or another, and that's the New York Times versus Sullivan. This is the famous case which determined whether or not a public figure has the same rights as other individuals. And what the story was about was it started dealing with politicians. A politician named Sullivan in Alabama thought that the New York Times did a rip article on him and sued. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, in their ruling, said a profound national commitment to the principle that debate on public issues should be uninhibited, robust, and wide open. But the key phrase in this, and the key idea that came out of Times versus Sullivan, or at least I think it is, is that in order for somebody who is suing a periodical to win, they have to prove that the periodical went after them with deliberate malice, that they deliberately, premeditatedly set out to go after them and ruin them or undermine them or do something deliberately hateful to them. So it's important to understand that Times versus Sullivan laid that down. In ensuing years, it expanded from politicians and a robust debate about national policy or any policy. And what they did was now expanded it out to dealing with anybody in the public eye, which also leads you to the question and the definition about who is in the public eye. Am I a public figure? So am I subject to a different standard than somebody else? Because here I am, I'm on TV, I'm a star. I don't know if I am or not. But what happens with that? So over the years, there have been other lawsuits that have involved this type of discussion, one of which involved the comedian Carol Burnett, who sued the National Enquirer because the National Enquirer wrote that she was so drunk one night in a Hollywood restaurant that she crawled across the floor, ended up under the table of Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, and vomited all over his shoes, which Burnett proved was a lie, because she never had a drink in her life because both her parents were very, very bad alcoholics, and she swore she would never drink. And of course, the great irony of this is the money she won, which was in the millions of dollars, helped create the Carol Burnett School of Journalism at the University of Hawaii. But the other case that we've dealt with in class was a case of Falwell versus Hustler magazine. And this involved, if you look at the picture, go back. I don't want to. I'm not going to show that. I'm not going to show that PowerPoint slide on TV. Please, with the person in the middle right here, the Reverend Jerry Falwell, the late Jerry Falwell, who was the founder of Liberty University and the Moral Majority, and the guy on the bottom, Mr. Larry Flint, who was the founder of Hustler magazine, which is just short of being a XXX porno magazine. What happened was that Mr. Flint printed an ad, which they started to show, which I'm not going to show you here. I showed it in class, but I'm not going to show it on TV. And in the ad, which is a parody, P-A-R-O-D-Y, of an advertising campaign for a liquor called Campari, which says, "You'll never forget your first time," in which Mr. Flint's writers, or Mr. Flint himself may have written it, saying that Mr. Falwell, the Reverend Falwell, had experienced coital relations with his mother in an outhouse, and that he got drunk all the time because he did not love, what do you think I can, one of the paraphrasing quotes is, what, do you think I can lay down all this BS sober, when he was preaching and trying to preach his political point of view. On the bottom of the ad, it says, ad parody not to be taken seriously. Well, Mr. Falwell, trying to stand up for his mother and his beliefs, sued Mr. Flint and Hustler magazine. And since he was based in Virginia, he very smartly brought the case in Virginia. And he won on the first level, won on the second level, won on the third level. But when it got to the United States Supreme Court, Mr. Flint won, saying the quote, and the Supreme Court, by a unanimous vote of 8-0, wrote, "Proof of emotional distress, even with bad motive, can't protect public figures from satirical assaults, no matter how outrageous." This is part of what the First Amendment is about. This is what, as my former colleague, Tom Cafferty, who is a lawyer and taught communication law, used to say, that if it's speech that is the most heinous, the most hateful, the most vile, the ones that we disagree with most, that's the ones that need to be protected the most. And that's what this is doing. that part of the First Amendment enables me, if I choose to criticize anybody I want, as long as I'm not libeling them, and enables me to make statements of what I want in there too. So we're going to change to the next slide here. Right, thank you. Now, it wasn't just with Falwell and Flint, as I pointed out, this year alone, the professional wrestler Hulk Hogan, for those of you who remember Hulk Hogan, okay, gonna say my prayers, take my vitamins, the man upstairs, good, okay, brother, sued Gawker, and there is lawsuit backed by an internet billionaire named Thiel, put Gawker out of business because Gawker published a tape of him, literally the tape of him sleeping with his best friend's wife, and his best friend was a disc jockey named Bubba the Love Sponge. Hogan's lawyer argued that the publication of the video was a gratuitous invasion of privacy and had no news value, and that it served only as fodder for reader clicks and a source for advertising revenue. And the other part of this is Hogan, before the lawsuit, had asked Gawker, or demanded Gawker, take the video down, and they didn't. Gawker originally was ordered to award Hogan $115 million in pay and $25 million in punitive damages. That has since been reduced to about $47 million, but it was still enough to force Gawker to go out of business and sell out. And the lawsuit raises what legal scholars say are important and largely unresolved issues about the line between privacy and free expression in the internet era. We don't know. The internet is the Wild West for all this, and this is why one of the things that's also coming up now with the idea of fake news. What is fake news? What isn't fake news? What right do you have to put fake news out there? Change. The other thing is, what happens when two amendments to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights conflict? What is it when the First Amendment right to have a free press conflicts with your right and my right to have a fair trial by a jury of our peers, as listed specifically in the Constitution? Should cameras be in the courtroom? The Supreme Court of the United States thinks no. They think that what happens is that lawyers will play up to these, to the cameras, and not give people their fair due, their fair defense in court. In fact, there have been cases along the way, not that haven't gotten to the Supreme Court, but there have been cases along the way that have been appealed that have challenged that and have dealt with that. But I mean, and the Supreme Court of the United States itself is not a modern body. They are just starting to post their court filings online. Only in important cases will you get audio transcripts the day of the trial. But there are two historical cases that deal with free press and fair trial. One is the case of New York State versus Steinberg in 1988, and the other is the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, aka OJ, in 1995. Steinberg, as I said in class, was a New York lawyer, and when he was arrested in his Chelsea, I believe Soho or Chelsea apartment in New York City, they found his common law wife, Hedda Nussbaum, beaten to a pulp, and that she'd been beaten with free weights. And one of their illegally adopted children was dead, and the other one was chained to a radiator. It later came out that there was a headline in the news. The next day there was a newspaper headline that's called Nussbaum, the lion-faced woman, because she had what we used to call a Jewfro, with her hair out to here and her nose was flattened so much by the beating she had received. And Steinberg went to trial. And this was the first real tabloid trial in the local New York area where they put her testimony on TV. And it was all over the press, it was all over the tabloids and so forth. When the case went to the jury, there had been 14 people sitting on the jury, 2 were alternates. The alternates were released and said that they had heard from the press and read the press throughout the trial. They were supposed to be what is known as sequestered. And when the judge called them in, the judge asked them the question about whether or not this would affect their verdict, and they said no. But the question that comes up is whether or not it would have been a problem for Mr. Steinberg to get a retrial, a fair trial of his jury and his peers when he was done. The same thing can be said for the case of California versus O.J. Simpson, because this was a year-long trial which was covered gavel to gavel, moment to moment, breath to breath. And many times during the trial, the late Johnny Cochran, who was Mr. Simpson's lawyer, asked for a mistrial, and the judge, of course, would not give it. But if a mistrial had been declared in the Simpson case, would Mr. Simpson have been able to get a fair trial in a retrial? And the answer probably is no. But this is one of the things and one of the debates that goes on dealing with cameras in the courtroom. Change. All of this, though, all of these rulings come under legislative decisions, not because of the FCC rule, not because of anything else. One of the things you have to remember is that the agencies of the government don't pass laws. Only Congress can pass laws. Only the President of the United States can sign those laws, and only the Supreme Court can eventually rule on whether these laws fall under constitutionality. There are three big acts we discussed this year. The Radio Act of 1927, which formed something called the Federal Radio Commission. The Communications Act of 1934, which was the successor to the Radio Act. It enabled the government to deal more broadly with even at the time of 1934, the wildly expanding technologies that were being developed at that time. They created something called the Federal Communications Commission, which is something we're going to talk about in a minute. And then also talked about the Telecom Act of 1996. And one of the things that happened in the Telecom Act of 1996, and since then, and really has been discussion all through time, and mostly since 1981, is something about whether or not, what's the role of government. And the role of government is something that, as I said to you, is something that prevails through all three of these lectures that we're going to be reviewing today. And that is, and then Professor Pavlik's lecture has nothing to do with that, but we'll talk about that in Free Speech for Sale. And that is, what is the role of government? How much jurisdiction do they have? How much jurisdiction should they have in dealing with any of this type of information? What are the reasons people want there to be regulation? People who are in favor of regulation, especially in the world of over-the-air television, is dealing with something called the scarcity factor. The scarcity factor is the belief that there is a finite number of spots on the over-the-air broadcasting spectrum, and that falls under the public trust, and that needs to be regulated. Those who are against government intervention in all this, those who are against there being excessive regulation, are saying that, no, there's no scarcity factor. There's a lot of things that are out there. I mean, RUTV right now is a great example of there not being a scarcity factor because it carries so many stations to you. And not only that, the way that this is being presented to you on channel 25.1, right? 25.1 is just 1 out of 10 within the one part of the spectrum that's number 25. So, because of the way that it's all split up and all that. By the way, this would at one point would be a nice segue to Free Speech for Sale. Just a reference in Free Speech for Sale. If you remember the part in Free Speech for Sale where they're talking about the giveaway of billions and billions of dollars worth of broadcasting spectrum, and they say how to chop up the internet and chop up the digital spectrum, this is one part of chopping up the digital spectrum, that it can be just one part of that one section of number 25, however I'm not going to go into the physics of it and all the complications, but that's part in there. Okay, change please. The FCC is the ruling regulatory body over media in this country. You're having problems with this, yeah. The prompters. There are 5 members to the FCC. Only 3 can be from the same party. Now, because laws are written vaguely, The definition and marching orders of the FCC is also written that way. The FCC was created to, quote, serve the public interest, convenience, and necessity. But nowhere in the Communications Act of 1934 or anywhere in government law is the term public interest defined, convenience defined, or necessity defined. So there's, the public interest of people here in New Jersey is probably different than those of people in Mississippi. What we will accept as something that's allowable over the air and good to our ears here in New Brunswick / Piscataway, New Jersey, is different than what they might feel in Oxford or Tupelo, Mississippi. So, it's kind of strange. It's also supposed to be a governmental body that's supposed to serve the public interest, not political interests. And it does serve political interests. At points, legitimate sales of radio and television stations have been prevented because of lobbying by certain groups because of what was involved. The sale of 3 stations in Chicago by a group called Polk Ventures back in the early 1990s to CBS was prevented by the FCC because they didn't want Howard Stern being on those over-the-air stations, because it was at the time when Howard Stern was using language and performances that were considered to be untoward. So he was fined upwards of $2 million. At the same time, he was using language that wasn't acceptable by the FCC. Don Imus was using the same language, but because he was politically connected and tied in with the people he was covering, he was never fined for the same sort of language. And the FCC will approve requests regulation based on which party's in power. Change, please. But the most famous example of how the FCC gets its power comes from a case called FCC versus Pacifica in 1978. Pacifica owned a radio station in New York called WBAI, it still does, which has Democracy Now! And Amy Goodman, and is on there for everybody to see. In the early 70s, a father and his young child were driving down the Long Island Expressway about 2:30 in the afternoon when the record Class Clown and the bit The 7 Words You Can't Say on Television by the great comedian George Carlin. And if you've never heard this, go to YouTube, go listen to it, go listen to all the George Carlin stuff. He was amazing. Played on the radio. Now, the 7 words you can't say on television, I'm not going to say on television today. I said them in class. But know that they involve defecation, coitus with one's maternal unit, body parts, and things of that nature. And you know what those words are. The father filed a complaint with the FCC. The FCC sued Pacifica, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the FCC, but not based on content, but based on time of day. They said that words need not be obscene to warrant sanction. Audience, medium, time of day, and method of transmission are relevant factors in determining whether to invoke sanctions. And so this eventually led, by the way, for those who are interested, to the TGIF sections on ABC on Friday nights, which gave you Urkel and gave you your favorite Boy Meets World, which now is Girl Meets World, which I've seen once and I did not like it. It wasn't as good. But the idea that the FCC has that power to control content was there. It continued and continues to this day, where there was a case in 2003 where the singer Bono from U2 and Cher were on the American Music Awards and they dropped the F-bomb. And it was live TV and there was no filter on it and there was no delay. And the FCC fined every single Fox station that carried that broadcast $250,000. Fox took the FCC to court. Originally, the court ruled in favor of FCC in 2009, but then it came back in 2012. But what's interesting, I found, is in the ruling, had the ruling itself, final ruling in favor of in favor of Fox, had nothing to do with the content once more. what Justice Anthony Kennedy said was that the commission policy in place at the time of the broadcast gave no notice to Fox, the other one was ABC, that a fleeting expletive or a brief shot of nudity could be actionably indecent. Which what he's saying is, hey, you didn't give them enough notice that you're going to throw a flag on them. So the whole thing was thrown out of court. But in the end, the court did not rule on content once more. Now, a lot of what's happened in the past 35 years comes down to media deregulation. One of the things in terms of should the government be involved or not has been a source of contention. Prior to 1981, the media were democratized and supposed to serve as many voices as possible. But when President Ronald Reagan and Vice President George H.W. Bush came in 1981, their administration proceeded to deregulate media and have led us to where we are today. They repealed ownership limits. Originally, over-the-air TV had a 3-year limit on the length of broadcast. Actually, I'm sorry. This is ownership. They had a limited number of ownership of stations that one owner could own. We're going to get to that in a minute. I've skipped over to the lengthening license terms. Originally, broadcast license for a TV station was 3 years. For a radio station was 5 years. That's changed. We'll get that too. They eliminated required program logs. Program logs were supposed to be legal representation about what was run, when it was run, and how it was run. It repealed commercial limits. They used to have a limit on the number of commercial minutes that could be used in any given day, or any given hour, or any given segment. It lifted ascertainment requirements and eliminated non-entertainment requirements. Those were the public interest shows, the public affairs shows that stations were required in order to get their licenses. And to me, the most important rule that they really screwed up on, well, one of them, is something called the trafficking rule. The trafficking rule, which is extremely important, stated that if I bought a station today or bought a license today, I would have to hold on to it for 3 years. That has been eliminated. That was eliminated, and when that was eliminated, that meant that radio station and television station licenses could be bought and sold willy-nilly and treated just like any other commodity like potato chips or toothpaste and sold to the highest bidder. And it destabilized the media environment and led, along with the repealing of ownership limits, to the media environment we have today. Change, please. Old ownership regulations. In the old days, there was something known as the 777 rule. The 777 rule stated that no owner could own more than 7 AM, 7 FM, and 7 over-the-air television stations, and those television stations could not reach more than 25% of all households. Now, this wasn't just a Republican, the Reagan administration, who played along with these. When the Clinton administration came in, they changed that to 12-12-12. They were the ones who got rid of this rule. They also changed it then to 18-12-12. But that now is blown out of the water, and we'll get to that in a minute. Broadcast networks could not own cable systems, but could own cable programmers. Local TV stations could own cable systems in the direct viewing area. Now, this one is unbelievable, okay? Newspapers could own cable systems anywhere, but not television stations in the same area, and vice versa. Now, what's interesting about that is one of our alums is a lawyer. And he published on Facebook the other day an article that came from a website run by the lawyer Dan Abrams, saying that President Trump should look into eliminating the rule that prevents a television station from owning a cable station and vice versa. And that there's also another rule that said that a newspaper could not own an over-the-air television station in town, and that should be looked at, and that should be eliminated. Here in 2016, they're still talking about loosening regulations and still doing it, and it's something that's very interesting. And when I read it, of course, my ears picked up, and I said, I've got to mention it to the students during the review session. I did. Follow through. And of course, a television network could not own 2 stations in the same viewing market. Change, please. But that has all changed now. Radio ownership, there's a lot of gobbledygook that's listed there, but basically you can have one owner own as many as 1,600 stations, which is what Clear Channel Communication does. One of the students in one of your classmates said to me, "What's the big deal about that?" Well, the big deal occurs when an ownership group like Clear Channel can put their own beliefs and their own structure on 1,600 stations, some of which are the only stations in a town. So after 9/11, when they banned the playing of the John Lennon song Imagine, because they said, well, there's a line in there that says, "Imagine there's no country." And then the Billy Joel song, "We Didn't Start the Fire," which, they had fired the World Trade Center. And they banned both Jump by Van Halen and Jump by the Pointer Sisters because, people were jumping out of the World Trade Center, that they could do that. Or when they can dictate what points of view are on there, when they can screen that. I mean, it's not that they shouldn't have the right to do it for the couple stations here and there, because that's part of the First Amendment. On the other hand, when they own so many stations that they basically control all the voices that are there, that's undemocratic. And then the TV limit is now limited to 39% of all households. If you're interested, go on YouTube, write in West Wing station ownership or something like that. And there's a great episode about that on one of the West Wing episodes. Broadcast licenses, what used to be 3 for over-the-air television and 5 for radio, are now all 8. And a company can own both a newspaper and a television station in the 20 largest markets, but they want to make it so it's in all the towns. Change, please. Now, the other part of this, of course, is how many stations one owner owns. Markets like New York or Philadelphia with 9 or more over-the-air television stations, there's no ban, there's no regulation whatsoever. What does that mean? In New York right now, there are 6 big commercial television stations. Channel 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, and that's it. Of those 6, 2 are owned by News Corp. A third, WPIX, possibly could be bought by News Corp. So right now, 1/3 of all stations have the same owner, which means they're controlling 33% of the market. If they get PIX, they're controlling 50% of the market. That goes against everything that we're supposed to be about, trying to open up the media to as many voices as we can. And that's what the current regulations are. And with all the laws and all the regulations, where are the regulators? Why are all the cable companies being bought and sold? Why can Comcast buy NBC and basically control the market? Why are there only 5 owners out there who work together in a trust-like fashion, violating everything that's been on the books ever since? Why are they able to do that? Well, that's one of the questions that we have to ask moving forward, and what you have to ask, and not just sit idly by and do that. That was dealing with the First Amendment. I'm going to get some water. Sorry, guys. Have to do this. I'll get right back in the picture and all that. What I want to talk about now is public broadcasting. And when you think of public broadcasting, most of you are bored out of your mind. I know that. Most of you don't watch it. But I consider public broadcasting to be the people's media. And it's important for us to know about it. And now, of course, when you think of public broadcasting, and we've talked about this in class, most people just think of opera or alternative programming, great performances, the Civil War, the documentaries, and the NewsHour. But as we talked about in class, it's Sesame Street. Most people, when you think about public broadcasting in your age group, it's Sesame Street. The problem is, just like with public broadcasting itself, Sesame Street was actually running out of money. Now, you would think that with all the Sesame Street paraphernalia that I bought over the years when my kids were really young, or that you parents did, how many of you had Sesame Street characters on your pull-ups, or your loves, or you had your Tickle Me Elmo, or things like that. You would think, well, it should be fine. But it costs a lot of money to put this stuff out there. So for the next 5 years, Sesame Street will have its first run episodes on HBO. And it makes you wonder what our media have come to when you have pay cable, subscription cable, being the backbone for public television. There's something wrong in that. There's something that's missing. There's something that's going haywire with it. And what does this mean for the future of public media? And can it survive without increased government funding? Now, a lot of you, change please, know that Sesame Street changed how we watch TV, how you watch TV. It changed American education irrevocably. It's unbelievable the impact that it's had on American education. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But I only think that Sesame Street was 80% successful, as I told you in class. It perfectly melded instructional television and educational television, but at the same time, it changed your studying habits. It changed your viewing habits. It changed the way that everybody watches TV. It changed the way that programs were constructed. Because what it did was it shortened your attention span and forced you to watch television, and what forced the makers of programming, including movies, including all video, to watch things in a different way. In the old days, you would have, 45-second sound bites. There was a study, and I referenced this in class, done by Harvard in the 1990s, that said during the 1968 presidential campaign between Richard Nixon, George Wallace, and Hubert Humphrey, the average soundbite on TV was 44.9 seconds long. By 1988, in the George H.W. Bush campaign versus Michael Dukakis, it was down to 8.9 seconds. So how come you lost almost 35 seconds in there? Well, the original question was, was it shortening of sound bites, the shortening of this, shortening of that? But a lot of it goes back to Sesame Street. Joan, the original Sesame Street pilot, as I've said to you, was a complete and utter failure. I was fortunate enough when I was in graduate school to see the original pilot for Sesame Street. And it was in very long segments with very long bites. And it failed. And the reason why it failed was that most children who are the ages between 2 and 5 don't have that long of an attention span, that they can't concentrate on 3-minute, 5-minute, 7-minute, 9-minute, 10-minute segments, that it has to be quick and right and straight to the point. Joan Gans Cooney, founder of Sesame Street, went to a party in Washington, D.C., and talked to somebody who said that their young child loved commercials and could pay attention to them and could recite them verbatim. And so she said, well, let's make Sesame Street that. And they did. So now you have a lot of quick cuts instead of what you're having today, which to you right now, some of you are trying to change the channel, not just because it's me, but you're trying to change the channel because this has been a one-shot the entire time. And you're not used to having, not used to just watching things for a one-shot. So what she did was she got them to revamp Sesame Street, so then you ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, with cuts every time you had a 1, then a 2, then a 3. And it created a lot of action, a lot of movement, which titillated the young viewer. And that got them going. And it changed subjects, it changed camera angles, and went back and forth between things. And it was a great change for the program and made it very successful. But what it did was it trained you, or trained the people then and then you, to be able to watch only stuff with quick movements and a lot of movements. And so what happened with that generation, if you were between 2 and 5 in 1969, in 1981, MTV debuted. And at that point, people were between about 15 years old, 14, so they watched it that way. So you had a lot of the quick cuts with all the old music videos. Just look at Video Killed the Radio Star. Look at, you might think, by the Cars. Look at how the different cuts are the cuts are quick, and they're going through that. Well, those are the same people who in 1981 who have been running television for the past 15 years. And they're the ones who create that type of television for you, and that's how you've been trained too. The other part of Sesame Street is that question that it raised was whether it raised expectations too high. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't challenge you, Believe me, I try every single day to challenge each and every one of you. But it's a matter of what are 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds capable of doing. I gave you some examples from class about that. And it's not just the expectations about what you're doing, it's what teachers thought you were doing. I gave you the example of my daughter who came home from, who I went first day of preschool, she's 2.5, and I asked the teacher what was going on and how she did. And she said she's the smartest kid in the class. Why? Because she knew her numbers and letters. She didn't know what it meant about the numbers and letters, but she knew them. And that was my argument to her, but that's because she watched Sesame Street so much. So the idea about Sesame Street was very successful, but again, nothing is ever 100% successful. Nothing's ever that way. But public broadcasting wasn't always this way. Public broadcasting started out as educational broadcasting. And the first government decision involving it came in 1945 when the FM radio band was reallocated. 20% of all channels were dedicated for education. Now, this is the same FM band that created by Edwin Howard Armstrong and wasn't having much impact or penetration into the public's mindset. And they were hoping to use this part of the FM dial to try and get more people listening. But also, it was set aside at between 88 and 92 on the FM dial, and it still impacts you today. At WRSU, 88.7 in your dial, the voice of Rutgers, the campus radio station, and the core, 90.3, the VPH, here on the over on the Livingston campus and working with Piscataway High School. Both fall within the 20% numbers of the broadcasting spectrum, on the radio spectrum. 88.7, 90.3 are between 88 and 92 on the dial. It's important to know your campus media, by the way. Make sure you know your campus media because they're the ones who are doing it. RUTV is an example of campus media and doing a fine job. In 1948, government froze TV licenses, and we talked about that. I think sometimes I dream about the 6th report in order because I talk about it so much. But remember, there were 3 parts to the 6th report in order. The first one, which was expanded the number of stations on the dial from 2 through 13 and increased it to add 14 through 83. Second was the increase in the number of viewing communities from 345 to 1291. And the third part I told you was that 20% of all stations were going to be set aside for educational television. And that became public broadcasting, and you knew that back then. And it was set aside for that at that point. However, being the government that, as we know, the government as we know it is, it moved very slowly. And the first federal funding for public broadcasting didn't come until 1962. And I gave you the example in class about growing up and watching public broadcasting, and of course my father thinking that it was insane, because of a show, in a way, just like what I'm doing today, which is a one-shot, and this was the entire length and breadth of the show, which was a one-shot, and the person let's get over here like that, just going in, bonjour, bonjour, écoutez, écoutez. And I go, écoutez, écoutez, and my father thought I was insane. Guess what? He was right. But the idea was that there was no money being invested in the programming. Whoops, there you go. Being invested in the programming. And you need money to get programming. You need money to pay the people behind the scenes. You need money for the graphics. You need money for all of that, not one-shots. Sesame Street had investments. My show that I watched, Parlez-vous français, did not have any investments. And a lot of public television was that way for a long period of time. In 1967, the Carnegie Commission commissioned a report and released one on educational television. This led to the Public Broadcasting Act of 1967. It did the PBA of 67 did some things and didn't do other things. It created the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Now, again, I'm trying to differentiate between the CPB and the FCC. The FCC had 5 members, only 3 could be from the same political party. They wanted to protect from political infighting. But with the CPB, all 5 could be from the same political party. Now, there are a lot of people in Washington right now who are wondering what's going to happen with the CPB now that a Republican administration is coming in and what they might do to public television. And we're going to talk about, after the break, which I think is coming in about 5 minutes, we're going to talk more about public broadcasting at that point. But anyway, going back to this PBA of 67, it did a couple of things. It created CPB. Second is educational television became public television. Now, for a number of you, you may think that, who cares, it's semantics. But it's not just semantics. It has to deal with the audience and the perception of the audience of what you're doing. And this way, public television encompasses more things that enable more and different types of programming to be on there. But what it didn't do was establish a method of long-range financial support. This meant that public radio and public television had to continue to scrounge for dollars, which means they needed to do that to get their programs going. This created a vacuum in a way, and the CPB came to realize that they could not do everything that they thought they were going to be able to do. So what the government did in 1969 was they split up the responsibilities. And they've kept the CPB, but only as the funding source, and then established something called the PBS, the Public Broadcasting Service, which is the operator of interconnection facilities, aka the programming network. We're going to review the programming network way of doing things again after the break. But it also set the stage for a battle between 2 forces, ETV and ITV. And as I said, my master's degree is in instructional television, so I got to study both of them, and this justifies all that money I invested in back then. The difference between ETV and ITV, though, really, and all this infighting came down to money. If you do something educational television, it really is covers a wide swath of things that don't need to be specific. Whereas instruction, as instructional television, is something that's very specific, such as I said to you, putting together a toy or installing a new computer program. Step 1, turn on computer. Step 2, press button. Step 3, wait for drawer to open. Step 4, put CD in. Step 5, close door, that type of thing. But it also comes down to what the length and breadth of programming. With educational programming, with one program, you end up getting one program. You don't have to spend as much money. But with ITV, you have a lot of programs, and the funding people did not want to have a lot of programs. And this fight goes on for 4 years, where in 1973, PBS emerges from the fight as an arm of local station interests, and that helps create a much different, is a nice way of putting it, absurd is my opinion, way of distributing and disseminating programs to the public. Now?
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay, we have 1 minute. I'm going to take a break right here. And we're at the halfway mark of the lecture, halfway mark of the review session, because there's going to be a 10-minute break. So this wonderful group of stations can identify themselves. Station break. So please, tweet in, Facebook message in. Is there a phone number? No phone number. Okay. Somehow communicate, send your carrier pigeon, right? We'll take the message off the carrier pigeon, then they'll serve it over at the dining hall for lunch. Sorry, PETA fans. And we'll get the message. But please send in your questions. I hope there's somebody out there watching. Just tweet, say that you're hashtagging us, Maybe it'll be a corned beef hashtag. I don't know, whatever. Just, come in, let us know that you're there, that I'm not just talking in a vacuum, that you're watching this review session. Again, this is a review session for the Introduction to Media 189-102, and we're going to take a break right now. Oh, good. I'm glad you did.
What are you doing? You've been on this couch all weekend. Don't you want to go out and have some fun?
And what exactly am I supposed to do?
And you've been eating these processed foods all day. Aren't you tired of it?
Listen, pal, I gotta eat.
I'm glad you said so. Now that you're out and about, you have plenty of options to satisfy your hunger. If you're feeling retro, try Henry's Diner. You can get a burger, a sandwich, salad, and much more at any time.
Wait. You mean I can get a burger at 9 a.m.?
Yes, you can. You can even satisfy your sweet tooth. Starbucks has the perfect pick-me-up for you. You can order a coffee, cappuccino, frappuccino, and much more. You'll stay refreshed and caffeinated all day long. If you're in the mood for something more exotic, then stop on over to Hojai Asian Fusion.
Well, I am craving an egg roll.
Well, you're in luck, because Hojai Asian Fusion not only serves that, but General Chow's chicken, sweet and sour fish, and bubble tea.
So that sounds great and all. But what if I want something quick?
Then go to Kilmer's Market. Kilmer's Market takes eating to a whole new level with healthier food options and meals made just for you. Craving something zesty? Qdoba will melt in your mouth with quesadillas, burritos, tacos, salads, and much more. Reward yourself after class with a delicious dairy treat from 16 Handles. You can choose from 16 flavors and top it off with cookie dough bites, strawberries, or sprinkles. Whether you need a repair or want to buy new, Kite & Key is a store here on campus ready for your tech needs.
One problem. I'm a broke college kid. I can't afford any of this.
Well, no need to fear. Kite & Key has a student discount. You can escape reality for a few hours right here on campus at the Rutgers Cinema. Ticket prices are $7 for students with an ID, and without an ID, it's $9.50.
Hey, thanks for taking me to the Livingston Plaza. I feel much better.
Hey, I'm trying to watch the movie.
For more information on the Livingston Plaza, visit theplaza.rutgers.edu. Get off your couch and go have some fun! Did you lose your ID? Not sure of what to do? First, send an email to lostcard@aps.rutgers.edu to suspend your card so no one else can use it. Next, visit one of the RU Connection offices to have your lost or stolen ID card replaced. There is an office located on every campus. Rutgers Hall on College Avenue is open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. The Bush, Cook Douglas, and Livingston campus housing offices are open Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 5 p.m. The Public Safety Card office is open from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Fridays. You will need to pay for your new ID with $20 in RU Express. If you don't have RU Express, you can go to the cashier's office next to Rutgers Hall before getting a new ID. Make sure to provide a form of unexpired government-issued photo identification when asking for a new ID. It's that easy to replace your ID. Make sure to keep it in a safe place so you don't lose it again. For more information and a more detailed explanation, visit pst.rutgers.edu/rules.php.
By the time this video ends, someone will develop Alzheimer's disease. It is the only top 10 cause of death in America that cannot be prevented, cured, or slowed. 1 in 3 seniors dies with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. Almost 2/3 of Americans with Alzheimer's disease are women. Rutgers Knights Against Neurological Diseases and Disorders stands against this disease. For more information on Knights Against Neurological Diseases and Disorders and Alzheimer's, please visit www.kanddru.com.
I don't know, man. I don't know if I can run today. I'm really busy and... Wait, what? You're running there? I did not know this. I didn't even know that was a place.
Do you know all the places on campus where you can work out and exercise? Well, we do, and we want to share that with you. Werblin Recreation Center is located on Bush campus on the corner of Frelinghuysen and Bartholomew Road. Werblin has everything from badminton courts to an Olympic-sized swimming pool. The Livingston Recreation Center is located on Road 3 off of Joyce Kilmer Avenue. This center has a full weight room, hosts many different classes, and even has a spa located right inside to help you relax after a tough workout or maybe just a tough exam. The Cook Douglas Recreation Center is located on Beale Road across from the Cook Student Center. This recreation building comes equipped with a fun fitness center, pool, and racquetball courts for those of you who like sports with a little danger. The College Avenue Gym is located directly on College Avenue, right next to the Student Center. This location has multiple gyms and basketball courts, power and conditioning rooms, and is the only location with a rock wall. The Rutgers Fitness Center is located on Easton Avenue on the College Avenue campus. This is the only location that is just a fitness center, so this might be the place for people looking to just work with weights and machines. Rutgers also has multiple bike and walking paths that run throughout all the campuses. You can find a map of all the paths at rudots.rutgers.edu/bikewalk. Most facilities are open Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. until 11:30 p.m. Weekend hours vary, but you can find out more information about the facilities and their hours at recreation.rutgers.edu.
Do you like kicking back in your free time? Sometimes the dorms can get stuffy and boring, so head on over to the Rutgers Zone. Need somewhere to watch sports? Need to satisfy that ice cream craving? Or are you tired of your old video games? Rutgers Zone is where you need to visit. Enjoy some games, food, TV, karaoke, and so much more. And don't forget to ask for those ice cream toppings. With all of the cool things at the Rutgers Zone, why would you even leave? If you are on Livingston campus, make sure you swing by the Rutgers Zone, just a bus stop away. For more information, please visit zone.rutgers.edu.
The Rutgers bus system provides more than 15 options to get around the 5 campuses. Sounds overwhelming? But here's a quick recap of the bus routes and available resources to make traveling easier. On weekdays, the A and H buses make stops along College Ave and Bush. The B loops between Livingston and Bush, as the LX makes stops on Livingston and College Ave. The F takes an express route by traveling Route 18 from College Ave to Cook and Douglas. The Rex L goes between Douglas and Livingston, with the Rex B looping between Douglas and Bush. There are also weekend buses, which make stops on every campus. Each bus stop displays the routes of the specific bus stopping there and the expected arrival times. To learn more about the Rutgers bus system and additional bus services, download the Rutgers app, visit nextbus.com or rudots.rutgers.edu.
Douglas College was originally founded in 1918 as the New Jersey College for Women. In 2007, it was integrated into Rutgers University and is now known as Douglas Campus. Since then, Douglas has expanded to include the #1 women's history program in the country and Mason Gross School of the Arts, a prestigious fine arts conservatory. Although the Douglas campus is co-ed, Douglas is also home to the Douglas Residential College, the only all-women's program of its kind. Douglas is still growing. Stop by and see what's new today.
Hello, welcome back. I missed you. This is the second part of the review session of Intro to Media. Once again, please tweet in Have we gotten any questions yet from anybody?
Like a couple.
All right. Well, let me know them. What if, by the way, Chelsea Crane's here. That's why I mentioned her before. Before I start the lecture, what's your question?
What are the three main parts of the sixth report in order?
The three main parts of the sixth report in order. That's a great question. Who's it from?
Kim Bollard.
Kim. Hey, what's up, Kim?
Hey.
Hey, what up? Kim, since you're here, I can talk to you now. Yeah. Anyway, sixth report in order. First, the three parts, and by the way, sixth report in order 1952, which you don't have to know the year, was that it increased the number of television stations available on the broadcasting spectrum from 2 through 13, which is 14 stations, to adding from 14 to 83. It created something called the ultra-high frequency dial and enabled the original over-the-air networks, over-the-air spectrum to expand. Second was the number of viewing communities. Somewhere in Washington, as I've said before, there's a map with a bunch of concentric circles with pins in the map, creating the viewing communities. And that went from 345 to 1291. And the third part was setting aside 20% of all stations on the broadcasting spectrum for educational television. So that was with that, which segues us back into the lecture because we still have to do this lecture and we still have to do the other stuff too. Thanks, Kim. That was a great question. In 1979, Carnegie Commission caught a second version, and they called for a number of items, which was including more federal support, except Reagan and Bush, as I've said, administrations in the 1980s, cut funding for public broadcasting. And in fact, the GOP Congress of the late 90s and early 21st century, and as some people think will happen now in 2016, there's going to be, or 2017, more cuts to eliminate funding for public broadcasting. There are 4 types of PBS stations. It's very important to know this. State or local government, which is the largest category, where a state like Vermont or Indiana, happened again, will have the biggest part of it and contribute a lot of money to it. There's college or university stations such as Ball State University or Southern Illinois University, which have PBS stations out there in where they are. There are community stations such as WNET in New York, WHYY in Philadelphia, WETA in Washington. And the last one is public schools somewhere out in the middle of North Dakota where we have three, count them, 3 of our alums working in Fargo at KVAA television. They have PBS stations there. But here in New Jersey, we used to have a state public broadcasting station. And now, under Governor Christie in 2011, that was eliminated. And our licenses for those stations were sold off to WNET in New York and WHYY in Philadelphia. So we, the state of New Jersey, do not have a public television station that is licensed and run by entities here in our state. The stuff is taped in Newark at Gateway Center, but it does not owned by that. And it was the license and the ability to run it was given to a North Jersey political ally of Governor Christie. And he said it was to balance the state budget when they spent more on his defense in the Bridgegate scandal, but that's not a criticism, it's just a statement of fact. So we do not have an NJN, it's now NJPTV, but it's not really New Jersey's. National Public Radio is different than public broadcasting over television. It's divided into the haves and the have-nots. In National Public Radio, in order to be a have, you must meet CPB requirements to get funding, and that way you also have a say in national policy. And NPR produces its own programming. These are 2 big differences from public broadcasting, and these are the important differences. NPR produces its own programming and distributes it, while local stations produce TV and PBS only distributes. This goes back to that infighting from 1973 and PBS emerging as an arm of the local stations. So this is different than the traditional broadcast network where things happen at the central location, New York or LA, and the stations are sent down. With this, the programs are sent down from there. That's the way NPR runs. The way that PBS runs is that the programs are produced at the local stations and then sent up for distribution out to the local stations. So, for example, when you have Masterpiece Theater, which is produced by WGBH in Boston, it is produced in Boston and then sent out via the PBS, the Public Broadcasting Service, to the stations, and then the stations get to decide whether or not they are going to run it, as opposed to, let's say, NBC or NPR, where it starts at the central location and gets sent down. The second difference was that all TV stations are eligible for money and have a say in policy, but not all radio stations do that because they must meet CPB requirements. I'm on radio council at WRSU and have been for 20 years. At one point, we actually looked into becoming an NPR station, except that the rules were too restrictive for an entity of that size to become part of the NPR network, and thus we are not. But NPR News, as far as I'm concerned, is the best in the country because it allows you to go to places that you can't get before. In fact, for example, this morning, they had a British Broadcasting Company correspondent broadcasting from Iraq and giving a news story. No American reporter was on the scene, but the British Broadcasting Company person was there, so that enabled them to get there. And this is the type of story that NPR gives you, and there are some shows on there also that you should listen to. And I know it's hard for you to just sit around and listen to the radio and not do something else, but it's worth it. It really is. The future of public broadcasting, you don't have to know this quote, but what they're demanding is an investment in public broadcasting. And the demands that the criticism people have that it costs too much really aren't really looking at dollar for dollar and looking at what it brings and how much it does and doesn't cost to have public broadcasting. As you can see here, the entire budget for the Corporation of Public Broadcasting of $445.5 million in 2014 is a drop in the bucket compared to the trillions of dollars that are spent by the federal government in order to do other things. It's just amazing what critics hang their hats on in order to do that. There's still no federal plan, though, for the distribution of money. It's all politically motivated. As it says here, and I truly believe this, a democracy is only as free as its ability to communicate ideas. And public broadcasting is a commercial-free, or has been a commercial-free way to facilitate thought, facilitate democracy, facilitate well-being without having a commercial corporation impact or influence what sort of programming is happening. That's public broadcasting. But I'm going to segue here. We're not going to go on to cable satellite yet. You can keep that up behind me. The segue from PBS really goes to Free Speech for Sale, which is a documentary that you saw on the last day of class, or the next to last day of class, and it comes from 2000, but really segues from this and involves both government regulation and public broadcasting. One, it was broadcast on public broadcasting originally from Bill Moyer's documentary. Number two, it points out what is necessary even back 15 years ago that should have been changed, that has gotten even worse now, which is ownership by a few entities as opposed to more people in a democratic society, the impact of money on politics, and the impact of lobbying on politics, and how much money plays a role in our ability to have free speech. It's an important idea. The three parts of Free Speech for Sale, dealing with the campaign in North Carolina and the pig farmers, and that the pig interest, and it sounds crazy to say it that way, but the lobbying interest for the hog industry impacting the legislative race involving the woman involved there. Then the tobacco bill in the second segment, and in fact, as you can see, the sell-off of the broadcast spectrum eventually in number 3. But number 2, the impact of lobbying efforts by big companies who have an economic interest in certain bills and certain legislation and swinging the votes on things, even if it means, in this case, tobacco industry and impacting the health of Americans, didn't seem to matter as long as the money was on the table. So it was really important. And the third part, dealing with the networks, ownership, and the selling off of the spectrum, as I said, it all comes down to money. When they say it's not about the money, it's about the money. And whether or not you as an individual citizen have the same right as a billionaire, and I feel like I'm quoting Senator Sanders, millionaires and billionaires, and what we're going to do, that type of thing out there. And it's important that what Free Speech for Sale is saying, even now, especially in light of Citizens United, where corporations are being treated the same under the First Amendment. In this video, you saw somebody from the Brennan Center talking about that. To some people, it's an absurd notion that corporations are people. So it's just something to keep in mind. But that's what the import of Free Speech for Sale. I'm going to mention Professor John Pavlik's lecture now, in which he talks about the innovations that are happening in the industry and the changes in the way things are. One thing I want to stress that I can remember off the top of my head is the change in the way that media and journalism take place now. In the old days, it was very static, and it was top-down, it was authoritative and linear. Today, it's nonlinear and bottom-up with the advent of citizen journalism, with the advent of the internet, with the advent of blogging and all these websites. So, go back, study Professor Pavlik's lecture, and go from there. Before I go on to cable, are there any more questions coming from the audience? Other than from Kim? Okay. All right. Good. So then what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you now about cable and satellite TV. And as I said to you, I have no opinions. I had no opinions all semester. I never voiced them. I try and be as straight and up and down the line. But with cable and satellite television, I can't be, because I feel that they are ripoffs. Again, I'm going to review the definitions that you have to know to understand what I'm talking about. And again, you may have to know them on the exam. The franchise. The franchise is granted by the town or the licensing authority to be the distributor of programs for the community. Right now, I am speaking to you from the studio at Winkler Dormitory on the Bush campus and the home, right across the street from the home of Rutgers Television, Rutgers University Television, RUTV. But I am really in the home of the RUTV franchise, the cable system that is the distributor of programs to the Rutgers community here at the Brunswick campus. I am being cablecast to you via RUTV channel 25.1, which is the programmer. It's the producer and distributor of this show to you today. Usually, the programmer that we talk about, and by the way, remember we talked in the next, after we're done with definitions, I'm going to talk to you about local origination. This is a local origination station. It comes directly from the studios of RUTV to you via coaxial cable, as opposed to when you get to watch CBS, ABC, NBC, Showtime, HBO, CNN on RUTV in your dorms or wherever you're watching this. They sent it via satellite to here. We receive it here, and then they distribute it via the coax or fiber optic cable to your dorm, to wherever you're getting this. So, when you're thinking about what a franchise is, when you think about the programmer is, that's what it is. Again, please clean your minds up. Penetration. It's a term used when detailing the number of homes that cable service reaches. I don't know what the penetration here is on campus. I'm going to assume that every dorm gets most can. So that's not 100% penetration, but that's the number of homes or dorm rooms that get this, have the capability. Doesn't mean that you're using it, capability of doing it. Wired cable penetration of this past July in the United States was 54.4%, which is a 28-year low. It's wonderful. It's fantastic. You're cutting the cord. Good job. Pay-per-view is paying on a per-showing basis, one-shot deals. Subscription is subscribing to a pay cable program on a long-term basis. The analogy I used for this was pay-per-view is like going to Barnes & Noble and buying a magazine one time only, paying the $7, getting it. Subscription is paying for it and making sure it gets delivered to wherever you are monthly or bi-weekly or daily if it's a newspaper. And that's what subscription stations. HBO is a subscription station. Video on demand, which is the technological successor to or descendant of pay-per-view, allows listeners and users to select and watch or listen video content whenever they want. It's the technological successor to pay-per-view. The difference is pay-per-view gets shown and you can watch it when the cable company or the provider tells you can do it, whereas video on demand, you can do it anytime you want. One of the great things about HBO Go or any of those are VOD stations. So you can watch something anytime you want. When How I Met Your Mother was on at 8 o'clock on Monday nights, my daughters would watch it at 3 o'clock on Wednesday morning. So, that's VOD. The universe is the number of homes which can get a pay-per-view program. And the buy rate is the percentage of the universe homes which purchased that pay-per-view event. So again, the numbers are there and so on. The box. The box was the original hookup to the television from the cable company, which allowed you to switch channels. It's come back with the advent of digital television. The picture of the box there, I'm sure that Jeff Arbin, if he's watching this back in his office at RUTV, will look at that box and have some sort of pang of memory of that box, because that was a crazy box. Keeping in mind, remember, there were only 36 channels on that box. The dish is a satellite dish in the home environment's only receiver. As of July, 30.3% of all U.S. households had satellite television and other alternative delivery systems. And cable marketing, defined by Phil Mushnick of the New York Post as lying. Yes, they say they're going to be there between 10 and 2, but they're not saying whether it's 10 a.m. or 2 p.m., and they don't say what they say. It might be the 23rd, but it might be the 23rd of never. So you never know. Cable facts, I'm not going to go over all of these little facts here to you. Just suffice it to know that the average cable bill right now is at an all-time record high, and that since between 2011 and 2015, the average cable bill rose 39%, and they can raise their rates anytime they want to you. You're fortunate in that you can just get RUTV in the dorms. But then again, you might argue that you're paying for it with your room and board. And monthly subscriber fees, as I described to you, the way that you get your cable bill is by totaling up the amount you pay per station plus the vigorish that the cable company puts on top of that for their profit. Again, the average basic cable bill, just not the HBOs, not the pay stuff, is $103 a month in this country, which is absurd. The history of cable is that originally it wasn't supposed to be a cash cow. Originally, cable television was supposed to be a community antenna television. As legend has it, there was a town in western Pennsylvania and a hardware store owner came up with coaxial cable, which enabled them to receive and send program audio and video over the cable very clearly. And that way they didn't have to worry about the over-the-air signals that they weren't receiving. The community antenna television was run by local governments, and they sold the franchises out to companies that wanted to be the distributor of programs in the community. The normal charge at that point was 5% of the gross. So if your cable bill for the month was $10, 50 cents of that cable bill went to the towns to pay for the rights to do that. So it was a win-win at the point for everybody else. But over time, the original methods of augmentation or the transmission of signals one was importing distant signals into your community. Remember, I talked to you about the viewing communities. So if you lived in New Brunswick and you received on TKR cable, Boston, a station from Boston, that was the import of distance signal into your viewing area. Second, as I said, we here right now today, I'm cablecasting to you live on a local origination station, RUTV 25.1, and it's run by the local cable company. And then there's the subscription stations. The subscription station, HBO, Showtime, Cinemax, and so on. This is blasphemy. I'm not using Rutgers approved water today.
We have a question.
Oh, we have a question. Yes. What's the question?
At the end of Gov Christie's term, will public TV return an NJ? This
No.
is from Snigda, one of our engineers.
Hi, Snigda. The answer is probably, I don't know. See, they sold the licenses off, and the state of New Jersey would have to buy them back. And the question is whether or not, one, whoever is in power wants to buy them back, and two, what is the price that HYY in Philadelphia and NET in New York would want for them? They got them for relatively cheap, I think it was single-digit millions of dollars. But the value of those licenses is such that they may not want to give them up. And also keep something else in mind, that it's not just NJN TV. They also gave away the licenses and the right to run NJN Radio. NJN Radio was very important because in this state, we don't have a single radio station that reaches the entire state. The one state radio station, or Legend State over-the-air radio station, is 101.5 out of Trenton, but it doesn't reach all the way up to High Point. It doesn't reach all the way down to Cape May County. So they were using, in fact, another station that their owners had, I think it's Millennium, bought in order to reach southern Jersey, and they didn't care about northern Jersey. So what happens at that point was that NJN, there were numerous, I can't even tell you how many stations. It was very funny because you'd listen to a program and go, this is I'll say WNJN Hamilton, WNJ, and they had about 12 different stations and that covered the state of New Jersey. They're all gone now in terms of being New Jersey public stations. In fact, if you drive down towards Philly from here, some of the stations in South Jersey that were NJN station, all they do is broadcast WHYY. They don't even broadcast their own programming. So the question about whether or not they're going to buy it back, you're going to have the government pony up money and lose money on the deal in order to get them back. And again, the question is whether or not the government wants to do this. It's a very, by the way, Snigda? Snigda. Great question. It's a magnificent question. And I wish more people would ask questions like that and have some sort of interest in what's happening. Sorry, I'm getting caught in the wire. Interest in what's happening with their broadcasting, not only their broadcasting, but also everything that's going on with the government. Because, and I'm getting off the cable a minute, but as I always say, everybody at the end of the lectures, and Chelsea, you've been in my, you took it too. Remember, it's up to you, because the FCC, for example, controls what you can and can't do with your phone bill, with your phones. They control what the phones do, what they can charge you for, and everything else. And nobody seems to get involved. This should have been one of the big questions during the presidential race. What are you going to do about the control over our cell phones, over our technology? Because the government does control that. And in fact, recently, and I mentioned this in class the other day, as you guys know, as the class knows, there was a bill passed in Congress, and stuck in like page 1400 of the bill was something that eliminated the board of directors for Voice of America and Radio Free Europe, all of our propaganda stations, and they're just putting one CEO who's going to be appointed by the president in charge of it. And people are worried that the incoming administration is going to name somebody who's just going to advertise stuff how can I say it nicely, propagandize the president, not the country. And it just, without a board supervising it, it becomes a political ping pong ball. So I try and do that. But I think that's one of the best questions I've ever received in all my years of teaching. It's one of the most important ones. So it's really good. Thank you. Anyway, back to the lecture. It was run by local government at first, and the first FCC intervention happened in 1962. But that wasn't enough. In 1966, the FCC put in its first rules, and they were very strict rules. One was that you must have the must-carry rule, which said that any cable system that was in existence must carry all the stations that any consumer would be able to get over the air. Now, in the New York metropolitan area, that was 14 stations. So 14 out of 36 meant that approximately 40% of all stations that were on the cable box in the New York metropolitan area, here, or let's just say here right in central Jersey, was being dictated by the government. Second was that public hearings for any signal import in the top 100 market had to be held, which meant that they had to spend the money on that. The cable companies were upset about these rules because they felt the government was stepping in when it shouldn't have. They were regulating what they shouldn't have, and they went to court. But these rules were upheld in the Southwestern Cable case of 1968. But this started the same debate I mentioned back in the government regulation, and also I mentioned in public broadcasting, which is what is the role of government in the media industry? What is the role of government, or what should the role of government be when you're talking about the business of media? Should the cable industry be regulated? Should the government regulate media? And those who argued no, it should not be regulated, believe that over-the-air broadcasting represents an outmoded technology artificially propped up by the FCC and federal government and the NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters, the lobbying group for the over-the-air broadcasters. They felt that and I use this term, and I should have used it earlier, I used it in the lecture, social Darwinism. Let the strong survive, that the government should not be propping up any businesses just in the name of, they say, democracy, when in fact what they're doing is they're getting involved in, according to the people who are against regulation, that the government is getting involved in places where it should not get involved. Those who argued, yes, it should be regulated, say unrestrained growth has led to the consumer paying for programming he or she was getting for free, and also gives too much power and takes away the democratic way of broadcasting from the way that things are. And the personification, even though it's not a person, but the best way to sum it up is pay-per-view television, where people are paying for programs or types of programs that they were getting for free before, where the opportunity to get ripped off is there and established and put into place by the government and by the cable companies. Now, my next slide was the top pay-per-views of all time, and I'm not going to ask you about those at all. Believe me, I'm not going to ask you. It doesn't matter. But needless to say, as you can see by the Ultimate Fighting UFC fight from last month, that people are still buying pay-per-view, and it's their choice. But a lot of people will say caveat emptor, which means buyer beware. In 1972, the FCC put even more restrictive rule changes as the cable companies' length, breadth, and reach was growing stronger, larger, and longer. They said, yes, must carry rule, but then they limited distant import signals to 3 network stations, 1 or 2 independent stations, and any number of subscription. And they ruled that each cable system must have an education station, a local government station, and a public access channel. This increased the number of stations, according to the cable companies, to 22 out of 36 on the box that the government was telling them that they had to do. That's about 60% of all of a product. That, according to the cable company, was ridiculous, and they were angry about it. So they decided to take all this into their own hands. First, they created the National Cable Television Association and started to lobby the government to try and put laws into place which would help the cable company. So this helped deregulate cable's expansion into new markets and then paved the way for subscription stations. HBO came in much before the Cable Television Report and Order, but then TBS came along, Showtime, ESPN, CNN, and MTV. And then the cable companies fought back in court, using HBO as the front. The FCC wanted cable companies to pay copyright fees to the networks for using programming material that they didn't own. and the cable companies argued that they were being treated differently, and the courts agreed, saying that they were being treated like second-class citizens, and said that the FCC had to stop doing this. This, coupled with the social Darwinistic policies of the Reagan administration, led to Congress passing the Cable Communications Policy Act of 1984. Under this act, the law passed saying that fair competition existed if 3 over-the-air stations or signals were available to a viewing area. This made 97% of the country deregulated and took away all consumer rights and gave the power to the cable companies. Now, I argue to you that in a case of Madison Square Garden versus Cablevision, that this was the great example of how our rights were taken away. Please change the slide. Thank you. And as you can see, the players in the game, I'll go over them again. George Steinbrenner, CEO of at the time, the late George Steinbrenner of the Yankees. The most famous franchise in sports. Charles Dolan, the CEO of Cablevision. Bob Gutkowski, the vice president of Madison Square Garden Network. WPIX, an independent TV station, and up for grabs were the Yankee television rights. The Yankees from 1948 until 1976-7 had been on PIX Channel 11 over-the-air free TV. Charles Dolan, the CEO of Cablevision, approached Mr. Steinbrenner in 1976 and said, George, I own Cablevision, but we have a programming outlet called Sports Channel New York, which is a subscription station. I want the Yankees on here. I am offering you a nickel per new subscriber to Sports Channel to sign up with us, in addition to any other rights and everything else. And here's what I'm proposing. I'm proposing that from 1970, for the first 5 years of the contract, 100 games would be on free TV and 50 on Sports Channel. And then for the second 5 years of the 10-year contract, that would change. And what Steinbrenner said was, and this is a real important part, what happens if cable penetration hasn't increased because it was very poor in 1977, 1978. If it hasn't increased by 1983, and I might want to stay on that station, I want to stay on free TV. Dolan said, don't worry about it, and so on. Well, 1982 came along, and penetration had not increased, and Steinbrenner went to Dolan and said, Chucky, what's going on here? I want to stay on free TV, and Dolan said no. 1987 came along, the contract was about to be up. Steinbrenner put the bid out and for the rights, and 3 entities first came in, then PIX dropped off. As you can see here, the bid by both Cablevision and MSGN was 12 years, $500 million. I'm going to stop for a second and remind you that at the time, Cablevision did not own Madison Square Garden Network and the Knicks and Rangers. Cablevision was separate from them. There was also no Yes Network. So the bid came in from Cablevision and MSG in 1987. September of 87, Steinbrenner has not decided yet, when Dolan, the head of Cablevision, who has bid as Sports Channel against Madison Square Garden, goes to Bob Gutkowski, vice president of Madison Square Garden Network. He puts on his Cablevision hat, which means, as both a programmer and a franchiser, he has a dual role which he can switch between easily. Dolan says to Gutkowski, MSGN is a basic cable station. We want it to become a pay cable station. Gutkowski says no. Dolan says, if you don't, we are going to pull MSGN off of all Cablevision systems, which Cablevision, which was the #1 cable provider in the New York metropolitan area at the time, said, we're going to just pull you off. Madison Square Garden Network, which had bid against Sports Channel for the Yankees because they wanted to fill in their donut schedule, the hole in their donut schedule, because they only had fall, winter, and spring programming. They needed to have summer programming because they only ran the Knicks and Rangers. Went back to Cablevision, went back to Dolan and said, no, we're not going to do it. Cablevision pulled Madison Square Garden Network in September at the start of the hockey and basketball season. But they just left a black spot on the box and didn't fill it in. Consumers were upset. Whatever the price was at the time, let's just, for argument's sake, say it was $1 a month. People were paying $1 a month for nothing. So they complained to the government entities, to the Better Business Bureau, to all and anything that they could complain to. And they were told by all these entities, I'm sorry, we can't do anything because under the Cable Communications Act of 1984, you have no rights and they have the right to pull you anytime they want. And so we, the people, were without that spot on the dial. It sounds crazy, but that's the way it was and remains to this day, by the way. So what happened next was that Steinbrenner decided that Matt gave the bid and awarded the rights to Madison Square Garden Network, and they won out. So what was the result of all this? Winners and losers. Yankees and Steinbrenner received $43 million per year before one pitch was thrown. They're a winner. Cablevision and Dolan. Well, what happened after that was that Dolan called Gutkowski in March and said, we want to put you back on, but you have to become a subscription. Gutkowski said no. Well, how about this? How about, one of them said, how about if we raise basic cable rates for everybody? And let's go to everybody in the New York metropolitan area, all the cable systems in this area, and get them to raise it. And they got them. So everybody, whether they cared about Madison Square Garden Network or not, had their cable basic rates raised anywhere between 50 cents to $3.50 per month because of this deal. So they lost rights and they got basic fees increased. Winner. And I've suggested that the $500 million that they did not give for the Yankee rights eventually went to buying Madison Square Garden Network, so they had the Yankee rights. MSG Network and Gutkowski, they filled in the donut. They won. PIX. What happened to PIX? Well, Gutkowski went back after winning the bid and realized, well, he couldn't afford the number that he gave, the $500 million by himself, so he went to PIX and offered to let them pay MSG for the rights to broadcast 50 games. And PIX said, of course I would. They're the winner. So in all those winners, there's always a loser, and we, the consumers, are the loser because we're the ones who have to eventually pay the increased basic fees pay more at the grocery stores and other places for the products that are being advertised on the networks, and so on and so forth. But again, as I pointed out to you in lecture, this isn't the only place where this has happened. And back 30 years ago, it's happened recently when Food Network had the same dispute with Cablevision about the price of the retransmission fee. Again, that's the price that you're paying ESPN, $6.04 a month. And they were trying to get more money out of Cablevision. And Cablevision said no. So Cablevision kicked them off, but this time they didn't just leave a black spot on the TV. What they did was they put up very expensive commercials chastising Scripps Network, the owner of Food Network, and the HGTV. And they went back and forth until they finally settled on a compromise deal. But in the end, they paid all this money and they increased the fees, and that increased the fees that we, the people, have to pay, we, the consumers. And it's not just Food Network and Cablevision. Same thing happened with Time Warner and CBS. Same thing happened with the Weather Channel and DirecTV. It's all about the transmission fees because that's where the big money is. So after the Madison Square Garden Network fiasco with Cablevision, and that had been happening all over the country, consumers were really angry. So they petitioned the FCC, and the FCC changed the number of signals that had to be received from 3 to 6. And the hue and cry was so loud in 1992 that Congress passed something called the Cable Consumer Act of 1992. It was so important for them, for Congress in the election year, that when George H.W. Bush vetoed the bill, Congress overrode the veto. It was the only bill that the veto was overridden by Congress in the 4 years that George H.W. Bush was president. But it didn't really matter because the cable companies and the networks worked together to circumvent the law's intent. Once again, the copyright provision, in which would force the cable companies and the franchise to pay a copyright fee to the networks for the programming that they were collecting money off of, was circumvented. Well, that was supposed to be part of the bill, but they negotiated with the two entities negotiated. Sorry, I'm trying to get as much in as possible. We have 8 minutes left. And what invariably happened was that the cable companies let the networks and those who created more cable channels to get cheaper time, cheaper space on the trunk, which had increased exponentially by this point. And so within the next 5 years, from 1992 on, if you go do your research, if you're interested in this, you see companies like CNBC, MSNBC, ESPN2, all getting introduced and being put on there. And then the Telecom Act of 1996 is introduced, and consumers are hit very hard. There is actually a provision in the Telecom Act of 96 that said that if Cablevision or Comcast or whatever your cable company is signs a contract with your hometown today, starting tomorrow for the duration of the contract, the cable company can shut off service to the town and there's no repercussion. Also, the cable monopoly continues to proliferate because Congress works with them and the FCC to let the media giants get bigger and bigger and bigger. So you have the fewer owners getting involved here. So the consolidation continues, where Charter Communications purchases Time Warner Cable and Bright House Cable, and the government allows these mergers to go through. Charter is now the second ranked in terms of size to Comcast as a cable provider, but it ranks near the bottom of customer satisfaction surveys, along with Time Warner and Comcast. As you saw in the John Oliver piece I showed in class on Tuesday, Congress has higher approval ratings than Comcast and Time Warner. Other things do too, that you would never believe. Also, AT&T was allowed to purchase DirecTV for $48.5 billion, making them the largest multi-channel service provider in the country. Comcast is number one in terms of most subscribed to cable company, but AT&T, the original monopoly, broken up by the 1984, by the courts with the baby bells and everything else, which has been allowed to recoup all of its power and not only reaches into the phone industry, but it's all telecommunications and everything that's involved. Now, there's people out there who think that, DirecTV, Dish, Verizon, Fios are competition, but they're the same, but they are owned by the same people that control cable. One of the things that I learned a long time ago, and I think you may have learned, and I'm not sure if you did or not, with what your history class in high school, was about something about the breakup of the monopolies and the robber barons back in the early part of the late 19th century, early 20th century, and the antitrust stuff, and that Teddy Roosevelt was the great antitrust president. Well, there was a term there called interlocking directorates, and that meant that if you were on the board of, let's say, Apple, you shouldn't be on the board of Dell, because they're competition. Well, the cable industry doesn't work that way, and as you saw in the Free Speech for Sale video, it doesn't work that way. Whereas the same companies work together to own, two companies that are supposed to be in competition with each other either own cable systems together or own cable providers together. Bravo is owned by 3 or 4 different entities, and so on. There's so much money involved here, and there's so much, in not just the politics, but in the proliferation of media and outlets, that it's important to understand that they're all working together. And what we think are antitrust laws that are there, cable companies and satellite companies and phone companies are allowed by the government, by law, by rule, by regulation to operate as trusts, whether we realize it or not. And it's important for you, the consumer, to understand that. And some of you are. You're sick and tired of the crap that you're getting out there, of the high prices, of not being able to watch what you want, when you want, and how you want. So now in the fourth quarter of this year, of 2015, for the first time, the number of cable households dropped below 100 million. Through the third quarter of this year, in 2016, 1.3 million subscribers have dropped off of cable. Broadcast only increased to only 11 only homes, which means that they only do over-the-air sets, have increased to 11.6% of all homes. With Dish Network, with Sling, you can now access other things. And this is not an advertisement for any of these, but this is you cutting the cord, getting a grip on your communications lifeline. And a lot of the programmers have realized that. That's why you get HBO Go. That's why CBS broadcasts without you having a subscription to a cable company. You may never have to subscribe to cable again. And this chart, which you don't have to know about, shows what's happened over the last few years in terms of how many people are using cable or not. And as you see, it's going down, down, down. And you're realizing that you don't want to deal with the monopoly, you don't want to have to pay the high costs, you don't want to have to deal with that. And this is something moving forward that all of us have to look at. Now, a few things before we leave, okay? Because we have about 2 minutes. Number one, I want to thank all the people here at RUTV for the wonderful hospitality they showed me and by enabling me to do this every year and providing this for you. That's first of all. Second, the exam is being held on Friday, December 23rd at 8 a.m. in the academic building 2160, our classroom, the same classroom we've been in all semester. Number three, bring your own pencils. I do not supply pencils. I am not the Rutgers bookstore. Number four, I want to thank all the people here at RUTV, Chelsea and all the people who are out there. Okay, Kim. Kim's going like this. Kim and Olivia was in here before, and all the wonderful people here who have helped get this across to you. Also, you can get in touch with me, and also I want to thank my staff, of course, again, for being so wonderful. You can email them. They'll answer your questions. Don't think that you can do it alone if you don't know the answer. We're willing to answer the questions. I'm still holding office hours. Come by. If you want to email first to make sure I'm there or I'm not in the meeting, please come by and do that. I want to thank all of you once again for taking the course. It's been a pleasure having you in the course. Again, I hope you've learned something. One last thing. If you haven't done it already, please fill out the the evaluation forms, the SIRS. You have computers. Fill them out there. It's important for you to do that because we do read them. And don't just fill them out for my course. Fill them out for every single course here at the university because everybody reads them. They're a very important part of our lives. So again, once again, Friday, a week from tomorrow, the 23rd, at the academic building. I will see you then. I want to thank everybody here at RUTV. Have fun. And this is the last thing of all things. It's cold outside. It's freezing in here, but it's really cold outside. Don't go out unless you have to. And if you do, bundle up. Stay well. See you in 8 days. Take care.